This all happened over a span of 3 or 4 years when I was just a kid. I honestly can't remember exactly when I saw the first one, but I started dealing with this recurring nightmare that was half-lucid, kind of like a disrupted dream from time to time, maybe once every couple of months. As far as I can recall, here's how it usually played out. I'd be lying in bed, but the view wasn't from my eyes. Instead, I'd see myself from up above, like I was watching my room through a security camera. That out-of-body dissociation always freaked me out, and I'd try to float or swim toward my body, but I'd never get past swinging my head around to look at the room. I knew I was dreaming, half conscious of that fact, but it didn't make me any less scared. Once I'd settle myself down, I'd start noticing strange things about my surrounding zone, of the first being that the digital clock on my nightstand was counting backwards, which was weird in itself. That was always the first odd detail I'd notice in these dreams. Once I saw that, other bizarre stuff would start to catch my eye, like drawings taped randomly on the walls and dresser crayon scribbles that looked like they came from a kid my age, but I had no memory of ever drawing them. I wasn't a kid who drew much anyway, so these weren't things I'd forgotten, they just appeared there. These drawings always depicted a line of smiling people holding hands, with a smaller figure who I could only assume was me. They were always standing in front of a house with a blue roof, but honestly, that's about all I remember about them. Another detail of the dreams that sticks with me is an old toy train of mine that was always sitting on a different spot on my bedroom floor, though that's odd because I lost that toy years before. After a while of examining my room in these dreams, I'd feel an inexplicable urge to look out my bedroom window. I'd turn my head, and just like that, there'd be a man standing a few inches from the glass. He had short gray hair and a cut on his left temple. That's basically all I can recall about his face. He'd stare at me for a few seconds, then start clawing at the window like he was trying to open it from the outside. That's usually when I'd wake up. Sometimes I'd run straight to the window, and other times I was too paralyzed by fear to move. Still, I'd always end up checking, whether I wanted to or not. I don't know what I thought I'd find, maybe scratch marks, or a handprint, something from him touching the window, but there was never anything there. No one from outside, no evidence. After this happened 4 times, I finally told my parents. My mom said it wasn't unusual for kids my age to have recurring dreams, and my dad added that they were always just one room away if I was scared. I nodded and pretended that made me feel better, but it didn't really. My dad could tell I was still frightened, so he took my hand and we went outside to check the house. There was no sign of any Anino footprints, no smudges on the window, nothing. Still, that didn't really ease my nerves as much as I thought it might. Keep in mind, this was about a year into this whole thing, so I was having this dream roughly every 3 months, not every night, not even close. But experiencing the exact same nightmare 4 times, I knew it meant something, even back then. Interestingly enough, after that fourth one, they just stopped it, at least for a while. Nearly 6 months passed, and I went without a single nightmare. I let myself believe it was over. Everything just sort of faded into the background, like childhood fears do when life gets more normal. Then out of nowhere it came back. I have no idea what triggered it, but one random night I had that same dream again. Everything was exactly like I remember: the clock, the drawings, the toy train, all there. But there was something different this time, and it scared me twice as much as before. I couldn't quite figure out what it was, even though everything else followed the same chain of events. Then, as I scanned the room, I suddenly realized what it was. My bedroom window was open. Once I saw that, I woke up immediately. But that wasn't just a visual wake-up. I experienced a period of about 5 minutes where I couldn't move at all. It was full-on sleep paralysis, and this time it wasn't passive. I could hear my brain screaming at me to check the window, but I couldn't make myself get out of bed no matter how hard I tried. To make it worse, I felt a noticeably colder chill, like cold air was rushing through the open window I was convinced was wide open. Those 5 minutes were unlike any fear I'd ever felt. All I could think about was that that man was moments away from climbing through my window, and I was completely helpless. When I finally regained movement, I forced myself over to the window to see if it was unlocked. It turns out it was. That night, I couldn't fall back asleep. I was too scared. I don't even know how I managed to function the next day. A few more months went by, but I wasn't about to be fooled again. Every night before bed, I'd think long and hard about that dream treeing to prepare myself for the possibility of having it again. It sounds kind of crazy, but I thought that if I kept that nightmare fresh in my mind, I'd be less terrified when it happened. Surprisingly, that seemed to work. The next time I had that dream, I was only half as scared. I didn't even bother checking the window after waking up. By the third or fourth time, I was even less fazed. It didn't scare me anymore, but it lingered in my mind, kind of in a way that made me want to tell my parents again. Maybe it was the way I explained it this time, or that I was a bit older now, but they actually paid more attention. I tried to describe as much detail as I could, which I hadn't really done before. As I got to the part about the man and the cut on his forehead, their demeanor shifted, not hugely but enough for me to notice. My dad cut me off suddenly, asking if I was sure about the cut. I told him I was, and he looked over at my mom with a strange expression like there was something they weren't telling me. I asked what was going on, and they reassured me everything was fine, but I could tell they were hiding something. From that moment, I started thinking maybe there was more to the story. A few days later, my parents finally sat me down and came clean. Nothing dramatic, just told me there was something they needed to tell me. My mom did most of the talking. Apparently, when I was really little, so young I likely wouldn't remember, there was a man named Brian who used to watch me sometimes. They always called him Uncle Brian, but he wasn't related. They said he was a close friend of my dad's from college. He was around a lot when I was a baby and toddler, especially during times when both my parents were working full-time. But then something happened and my dad didn't go into details, just said there was a serious falling out so bad that they severed all ties. He told me he forbade Brian from ever coming near our family again, especially me. That was the end of it. I asked what caused the fallout, but they refused to say, insisting it wasn't about me and I didn't need to worry. The only thing they did mention that made my stomach turn was that Brian had a noticeable scar on his forehead from a car accident he'd been in before I was born. They didn't outright connect the dots, but I could make the connection myself. That night, after my mom went to bed, my dad lingered in the living room with me a little longer. I could tell he wanted to say more, like he wasn't entirely satisfied with how things went earlier. After a pause, he confided in Mehai's theory was that these dreams were my brain's way of processing something deeply buried, a memory from when I was too young to remember. He mentioned how close I used to be with Brian, how I'd cry when he left, how I always wanted him to read me to sleep. He said he couldn't think of any other way I'd know about the scar or that guy. I didn't understand what he was implying because I had zero recollection of Brian. I couldn't remember anything about him, not even one memory. Still, I had to move on with my life, dreams or not. Several more months slipped by, and I kept trying to piece things together, but it's hard to say exactly how much time passed between each dream. Still, after that talk with my parents, the frequency really dropped. I only had that nightmare once or twice more over the next year. But then, in year 4, everything took a darker turn. One night after waking up from that same nightmare, I glanced toward my window out of habitat. This time, I saw movement. I'm telling you, just a flicker, but I was dead sure something had shifted just outside the glass. That rush of fear I'd spent years trying to block out hit me full force. I jumped out of bed, screaming for my parents, who took me seriously right away. My dad hurried out barefoot into the yard, and my mom held me tightly inside. A few minutes later, he returned, whispering to her, and they told me to stay put while they called the cops. I stayed in their room, but I don't remember hearing sirens or any other voice. They just seemed to disappear into the night. My dad kept insisting that everything was fine, that the police would handle it. The next morning, he revealed that he'd seen faint footprints under my bedroom window, so faint, in fact, that he wasn't sure if it was Brian or someone else. When I asked him if he thought it was Brian, he said that was impossible. Brian had moved away, and he wouldn't have known where we lived. My dad assured me that nothing bad was going to happen again, and somehow, he was right. I never had that dream again. My parents don't like talking about that night, and honestly, I haven't pressed them much. I can't wrap my head around it. It's horrifying to think that every time I had that nightmare, someone could have been outside watching me. Is it even possible? I keep asking myself if it was actually Brian watching me. To be honest, it's hard to tell if it was him or just some stranger I subconsciously associated with him. Maybe my mind added that connection without me knowing. I've done some digging, and honestly, I have no idea how it could even happen. Maybe the noise from a disturbance outside caught my attention or made my brain slip into that image. I just don't know. What I do know for sure is that I highly doubt my parents actually called the police that night. I'll probably never know exactly what went down, and I've given up trying to get answers. If I ever do get the truth, I'll be sure to send an update. I keep this part brief. Most nights, I fall asleep with some kind of background noise of music, a podcast, thunderstorms, whatever helps me drift off quicker. Because I tend to dream actively, whatever I listen to tends to shape my dreams. For example, if I fall asleep to a soccer video, I'll likely dream about playing soccer. This approach has been a lifesaver because I had so many nightmares growing up, and this method helps prevent them. Just a couple of weeks ago, during a sleepover at my friend Ethan's house, I had one of the clearest dreams I've had in ages. It was a sleepover since his parents were out of town for their anniversary, so we stayed in his living room where he has these huge, comfy couches perfect for sleeping. That night I had a vivid dream I'd been at sea on this tiny sailboat. I've never even been on a sailboat in real life, so I don't know where that came from. The water was choppy. The sky was this strange dark purple and gray, and the wind was howling, but it didn't feel threatening. It was almost cinematic. Then suddenly, the boat lurched, something hit it. I just knew it. I couldn't see what it was, but it shook the boat hard and cracked something underneath. Water started pouring in, and I remember trying to stuff my jacket into the no use, of course. I started to panic, full-blown terror, feeling helpless. Just as the boat began sinking, a dolphin leapt out of the water, stared straight at me, and in perfect English said, "Wake up." That snapped me out of the dream instantly. Usually, I'd be groggy after waking up, but this time it felt different. I looked around to see if anything was off, but everything seemed normal. My friends were all sleeping, and the living room looked just as it had when I fell asleep. That in-between state of waking, where your mind struggles to process things clearly, that's what I was in. But then my brain started functioning properly again, and I heard something unusual, a rushing sound coming from upstairs. It wasn't muffled like a dripping faucet. It was steady, like a hose on full blast. That's probably why I dreamed about the ocean. I paused, trying to figure out what I was hearing, then, dumbly, I decided to check it out. I crept upstairs, trying not to make noise. The noise got louder with each step, definitely running water. It was coming from the bathroom at the end of the hall, which had its door slightly ajar. I could see the sink. One of the knobs was turned all the way to the right, water just gushing out full force. It didn't make any sense. It couldn't be accidental. I was about to step in when a strange feeling made me hesitate. The bathroom is big, with a long counter, a tub behind a curtain, and a corner toilet. Plenty of blind Spitzomion could have been hiding behind the tub or standing just behind the door. My stomach sank, and I got cold more than just from the chill in the air. I didn't go in. Instead, I backed out and ran downstairs to wake Ethan. I shook him hard, told him I thought someone was inside and that something was wrong. He was still mostly asleep, but the urgency in my voice was enough. He sat up right away. We left Ian sleeping on the couch and went back up together. When we reached the bathroom, Ethan didn't hesitate, pushed the door open and stepped inside. I was not ready for what happened next. Almost instantly, a figure shot out from around the corner and tackled Ethan from the side. It all happened so fast I just saw Ethan go down and a guy swinging a PVC pipe, like he was about to beat him to a pulp. I didn't even think, just rushed to grab the guy, trying to pull him off Ethan. We wrestled him to the floor, but he was bigger and stronger. Chaos broke loose. The guy managed to break free, shove us aside, and dash for the stairs. By the time Ethan and I stumbled out onto the porch, he was gone. The police arrived maybe 30 minutes later, but honestly, they weren't much help. They said the entry was through an upstairs window, which was wide open and unlocked. Ethan's family doesn't have security cameras, so there wasn't much evidence. They just said it was probably a burglar, maybe just a random attack. But my friends and I think there's more to it. Why would a burglar make loud noises turning on a faucet? That's not typical for a random criminal. Seems like a trap. If he was just after stealing stuff, why bother with noise? It felt targeted. Ethan's convinced the guy knew his parents were out of town and figured only Ethan would be home that night. So, maybe that guy's real goal was much darker, probably seriously hurting Ethan. I don't even want to imagine what could have happened if I'd gone in that upstairs bathroom alone. This all happened on a Friday night a couple of months ago. Bonnie's parents had planned a weekend trip out of town, probably for their anniversary, and Bonnie invited me to stay over. Usually her parents are super strict, and me sleeping in her room is a no-go. But since they'd be gone, we figured it was fine. Her neighborhood's one of those suburbia places where every house looks the same, quiet, almost deserted after 10 p.m. Honestly, I'm kind of creeped out walking out of there late at night. But I was relieved to finally have a night where I didn't have to worry about wild dreams. I showed up around 8, brought some snacks, and we watched a movie. Same old stuff. Her room's on the second floor, facing the backyard, where you can just see a dense line of trees bordering their yard. They had almost no outside lighting, so at night, it was pitch black, like staring into an abyss. Her queen-sized bed had plenty of space for both of us to stretch out comfortably without feeling crowded. I'll skip the boring details. We eventually turned off the TV around midnight and fell asleep. I don't remember exactly falling asleep, but I vividly remember the disturbing dream that followed. And here's the thing, I've only experienced a false awakening dream a couple of times in my life, and this was one of them. For anyone unfamiliar, a false awakening is a weird, almost transcendent experience where you think you've woken up but you're still trapped inside a dream. It's one of the main reasons I believe there might be more to this world than what we see. In the dream, I suddenly woke up to the unmistakable sound of a door slamming somewhere downstairs. Before I could even process what that meant, quick footsteps started rushing up the stairs. Without hesitation, I shot upright in bed, ready to stop whoever was breaking in. But strangely, Bonnie's room looked exactly the same as when we went to sleep, every detail just like before. The only thing different was this thin yellow glow leaking into the bedroom from the crack beneath the door. It was just a sliver of light, but I couldn't stop staring at it. My confidence was completely gone. My vision tunneled into that tiny beam of light as everything else faded away to black. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stormed toward the door. I was paralyzed, completely frozen, and then everything went silent. I kept fixating on that small strip of light under the door when suddenly, voices started. At first, just a woman's voice, and it was hurling all sorts of nasty insults at me about how I looked, my outlook, my future. But then it got more personal. It knew things about me I'd never told anyone, not even Bonnie, things I'd never shared. It recited events from my past, things I had said, things no stranger could know, no way they could. One voice turned into 2, then 3, until there were hundreds of voices planting my darkest secrets in my mind. It felt like the deepest fragments of my brain were being dragged out and scrutinized under a microscope. I couldn't handle it. I threw off the covers, sprinted across the room, and swung open the door to confront whoever was tormenting me. But as soon as I opened that door, all the lights in the house shut off at once, plunging everything into utter darkness. The voices stopped, and the air grew ice cold, sharp enough to sting. It felt like I'd stepped into another world altogether. I stumbled backward, disoriented, and curled into a ball under the covers like I was 6 years old again. Then I woke uponly. I wasn't really awake. I was still caught somewhere inside that nightmare. I slowly sat up, still scared but trying to reassure myself it was over. But then I looked toward the door, and there it was. That same thin strip of yellow light pouring beneath it, just like in the dream. I froze, looking at it in horror, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It didn't make any sense. Bonnie and I were alone. Every light in the house should have been off. I stared for what felt like ages, unsure whether I was awake or still dreaming. Then I heard footsteps downstairs. Definite, clear footsteps. Someone was inside, moving around. Immediately, I knew we were being robbed. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police discreetly. I told them what I saw and heard, then tiptoed toward the door to check if it was locked. When I made sure it was, I eased back next to Bonnie and gently woke her, covering her mouth so she wouldn't scream or make noise. She didn't resist, she just woke quietly. A tense few minutes passed, then the police arrived, loud and urgent, kicking in the front door and shouting orders. I sat upstairs as they searched the house, and before long I saw two masked guys hauled into police cars in cuffs. I spoke to the officers, thanked them, and then went back upstairs. Bonnie's parents rushed home early from their trip. Probably once they heard what had happened, and they weren't mad I stayed. In fact, they seemed, if anything, grateful. About a week later, Bonnie called me with some more details. The police told her that the two guys, once they were caught, admitted they broke in because they'd seen a Facebook post about the trip and assumed no one was home. Oddly enough, thinking about the break-in itself doesn't bother me that much anymore. What keeps me up is that damn dream. I get that the noise might have just bled into my subconscious somehow. That makes sense. But I still can't figure out why I kept having that exact image of the door and that glow. Bonnie thinks I've got some unresolved demons hiding in my subconscious, but I don't like to think about that. As for the door, I wasn't even lying down, I was asleep, so I couldn't have conjured up that precise picture of the light or the door. It just doesn't add up. That stretch of yellow every time I close my eyes, I see it vividly in my mind now. It's not obstructing my vision, it's just there, lurking at the edge of my thoughts. Part of me hopes it'll fade over time, but the other part worries it might be embedded in my brain forever.